The fans have spoken, and they were heard loud and clear. The Justice League Snyder Cut is coming, and it'll be even bigger than we thought. After years of teases and hints, fans will finally get to see the Justice League movie that was originally intended and more beyond that. In 2021, HBO Max will stream the much-anticipated Snyder Cut, and from what we already know, it'll be worth the wait. But what even is the Snyder Cut, and why is it taking this long to come out? More importantly, what can we expect to see once it does? Let's get into it and find out.
Shall we?
Okay, so in order to understand what the Snyder Cut is and why the announcement of its release is exciting, we have to review how we got here. The Justice League's predecessor, the Justice Society of America, is the first superhero team, forming all the way back in 1940 when Marvel was still timely. Despite that head start, it's been a long, hard road for DC's all-star Justice League to make it to the big screen. After all of that injustice to the venerable Justice League, it seemed that the collection of the world's finest was finally getting its due as DC Comics put together its own extended universe. At the head of the creative vision for this new universe was the sometimes controversial but certainly visionary director Zack Snyder, who had previously directed adaptations of The Watchmen and 300. Snyder had set a palette for the DCEU that was distinct from the bright and light Marvel Cinematic Universe. Snyder's DCEU was built around the somber Superman and his uneasy relationship with the Dark Knight himself, Batman. It was a grittier universe for the more grown-up DCEU. Before that vision could reach its culmination in the ultimate team-up, however, tragedy struck Zack Snyder's family. The untimely death of Snyder's daughter happened after principal photography had finished and post-production had just begun, causing Snyder to step down. To make sure that the show went on, DC looked to another director to finish the job. It just so happened that they already had someone on the lot with a successful track record of teaming up superheroes. Joss Whedon was over at Warner Brothers working on a Batgirl movie and was asked to come in and finish the film. It was both an obvious choice and an odd one. On one hand, Joss Whedon had helmed the wildly successful team-up The Avengers, solidifying the MCU as the kings of the comic book movie at the box office. On the other hand, Snyder had set up the DCEU as the antithesis of the MCU aesthetic created by Whedon himself. Whedon didn't just finish cutting, but did extensive reshoots to shape the end product, including the notorious digital mustache removal for the Man of Steel. This resulted in a rare case where Snyder fans and critics were in agreement. The movie was tonally inconsistent, with Whedon's lighthearted peanut butter not mixing seamlessly with Snyder's chocolate, leaving fans to wonder, what movie could we have gotten if Snyder had finished the movie himself? That question eventually became the hashtag #ReleaseTheSnyderCut. Online campaigns to pressure Warner Brothers started, including a petition with 179,000 signatures. There were a select few who had seen the rough cut without the finished effects, with all reports indicating that it was fantastic. Snyder eventually posted pictures of the developed film confirming the cut and saying things were in Warner Brothers' hands. Well, the pressure from the fans has finally paid off. Warner Brothers finally announced that the legendary Snyder Cut was going to be released on HBO Max in 2021. To make sure that the new release doesn't have the same unevenness of the theatrical release, Snyder has brought in the original post-production team. On top of that, the actors will likely be returning for additional dialogue recording. Snyder has already released director's cuts of Dawn of Justice and Man of Steel, which fans say answer the rough critical reception the studio cuts got in theaters. But the Snyder Cut of Justice League and the new release is much more than just artistic validation for Snyder and his DCEU fans. The deal with HBO allows for a level of freedom that Snyder could never have with a theatrical cut of the film. Current estimates on the runtime of the legendary cut runs close to a staggering 4 hours. With the freedom to have a 4-hour runtime or even have the film broken up into 6 segments, Snyder not only doesn't have to compromise tone and direction for the story, but also the stories themselves. So what exactly is that more going to be? Well, thanks to some early teasers and some recent announcements, we're getting a somewhat clear picture of what to expect. And what we know so far is plenty of reason to be hyped. Here's a list of the 5 biggest things to expect in the new cut of Justice League. As we recall, the action around Justice League involved the return to Earth of Steppenwolf, who was in search of the mother boxes that he would use to conquer the Earth. While the Amazons were on hand to explain what those boxes were and why Steppenwolf was exactly not the kind of person you would want to have them, there was an open question as to who Steppenwolf was and where do mother boxes come from. Of course, even the most casual DC fan knows that Steppenwolf is the uncle of a being named Uxas, better known as Darkseid. This Jack Kirby creation is the ruler of Apocalypse and one of the toughest villains in the DC universe. Snyder released images of the Justice League's Darkseid, indicating that the ruler of Apocalypse and general fan of a bad time won't just be an unseen menace, but as the architect of Steppenwolf's quest. This should elevate the story in Justice League from vague threat from beyond to harbinger of things to come. Cyborg was one of 3 characters that were getting their first full introduction in Justice League along with Aquaman and the Flash. Cyborg was the product of a father trying desperately to save his son by replacing damaged parts of his body with technology gleaned from a mother box. The resulting Cyborg has always been uneasy about whether it was worth being saved to be stuck as a half-man, half-machine. We saw glimpses of that rough relationship in the theatrical cut, but a relatively happy ending with father and son working together at the end of the movie. Things were not supposed to go that well originally, with Cyborg's father Silas dying in the original version, leaving Cyborg's relationship with his father unresolved. Like a true comic book superhero. You can't fight supercrime without a tragic relationship to at least one dead parent. Comic books are in a tight spot when it comes to endings, generally speaking, because there really isn't an ending. Even when a character dies, they generally come back. Unless they're Uncle Ben. It is never Uncle Ben. One of the big changes that leans hard into the dark feel is how it came to an end and what it said about the next step. Aside from the Darkseid edition including a history prologue where he invades Earth the first time, he also shows up at the defeat of his uncle. That defeat was a lot more gruesome as well, with Aquaman impaling Steppenwolf with his trident and Wonder Woman beheading him. The beheading would have been followed by the opening of a boom tube with head rolling to Darkseid's feet. No sly cameo on an asteroid. Justice League would have ended with Darkseid and the Justice League face to face. This would have directly set up Darkseid's eventual invasion and the plot behind Justice League 2. Unfulfilled promises in trailers are old hat. Characters appear in scenes they don't appear in the movies, looking at you, Hulk, and whole scenes don't make it into the final cut. That was the case with the advertising tagline for Justice League, Unite the Seven. With only 6 characters introduced, it didn't take much for fans to piece together who the 7th was. The obvious choice, and one teased in other ways on promotional material, was the one champion who, through brightest day and darkest night, no evil escapes his sight. Enemies beware of Green Lantern's light. The only hint that the Lanterns exist in the DCEU is a voiceover that suggests that with the Kryptonian dead and no Lantern in this sector, Earth was ripe for the picking. But, like Unite the Seven suggests, Green Lantern was set to make an appearance in Justice League. Of course, without the rest of Snyder's cut, we don't know why they would pop by Bruce's place, but if that scene makes it back into the cut, we're likely to find out. Remember all those visions that were happening back in Dawn of Justice? That wasn't just a way for Snyder to practice some atmospheric shooting. He was laying the groundwork for how dark Darkseid really was going to be. In those visions, a wasteland-ready Batman fights a cult leader Superman while the Flash pops out of the Speed Force and tells Bruce that Lois is the key. Turns out that he didn't mean the key to snapping Clark out of it, but the key to the dystopia. Darkseid would end up killing Lois Lane, setting Superman on a rampage, making him susceptible to Darkseid's anti-life formula that can control people's minds. While the nightmare reality is more of a subject of Justice League 2, we were meant to get more glimpses of it when Cyborg attempts to revive Superman. If nothing else, the Snyder Cut seeks to pick up loose threads left unrealized in the theatrical cut. And that is how the theatrical cut and the Snyder Cut came to be, and what we can expect from the new release. So what are you most hyped to see? Let us know in the comments, and while you're there, make sure to subscribe to CBR for more comic book content in your inbox. Thanks for watching.